Welcome to the Design Icons podcast, where we talk to creative leaders about work, life, and beyond. Design Icons is brought to you by Noun Project, the world's most diverse and extensive collection of icons and photos for every project. Today, we're chatting with Tom Froese, an award-winning illustrator, top teacher on Skillshare who's led over 120,000 students, and the host of the podcast Thoughts on Illustration. Tom has illustrated for clients like Yahoo, Airbnb, GQ, and the Wall Street Journal. He's best known for his brightly colored maps and illustration work made with expressive shapes and printmaking-inspired textures. In this episode, we cover finding a unique path as an illustrator in a crowded space, how to manage expectations and burnout, and ways to increase visibility towards getting more work. Tom, thanks so much for chatting today, and excited to dive in and get to know you better.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Nick.
To start off, can you just share your background? Where did you start, and how did you get to where you are now?
Sure. It's always hard to know where was that beginning, but I would say officially as a freelance illustrator, I would say I started in 2013, and that was basically after working as an art director and designer, kind of more in that ad world. I would say the biggest shift for me career-wise was becoming a Skillshare teacher, actually. So I became an illustrator in 2013, and then in around 2015, they reached out, asked me if I was interested in teaching a class, and so I ended up making my first class there. That was 10 years ago this year, actually. It was called Inky Illustrations, and it was really just based on how I was making my illustrations. It had a lot to do with my technique and with my style, and it was also something that I felt like it was kind of the trend at the time. People were trying to do more like hands-on, retro-looking textures and stuff like that. It's kind of like coming back, that idea of hands-on. But anyway, that shift to teaching, I wasn't really sure what would happen with that class. I just said yes to it. But seeing people respond to the class, make projects, really was transformative for me, and it made me realize kind of like there's something here and I should pursue it. And so that was, I would say, the biggest shift, biggest highlight looking back, I would say. And then anything else, illustration wise, anytime something I make gets to become a thing in the real world, I really like that. Just for example, I would say around 2018, I was hired by Canadian Tire. So they're like a big hardware department store in Canada. And they invited me to do a collaboration for their line of Christmas products. And so that was a really fun thing, just to see like my illustrations become like pillows and gift bags and gift wrap and little like ornaments. That actually got postponed because of COVID, and so it didn't actually end up coming up until 2021. But anyway, that was like a really a great moment. So just little, I would say, things like that, where my illustrations get to become these things that go out into the real world. That's when it feels like, oh, like I make stuff.
Yeah, I feel like seeing tangible results, there's such a feeling of satisfaction there, and kind of like seeing it out in real life. That's really cool.
Yeah, totally.
Tell me a little bit about your day to day. Like, are you grinding 9 to 5? Or are you kind of making up your own schedule as you go right now? Like, what does that look like for you?
Yeah, it's usually I start off around 8 in the morning, and I draw for an hour, or do if I'm trying to write something, I'll replace drawing with writing. And then at 9, I check my email and my calendar and make sure, there's kind of things I need to do that day. I kind of use my email and my calendar to help me know exactly what that is, aside from the deadlines I know are coming. But yeah, I'd say it really depends on the day and what projects I'm working on. But I usually wrap around anytime between 5 and 6. And it also just depends on whether I have to drive one of the kids to something or that kind of thing.
Cool. Looking back on your career, what do you feel like has been the hardest creative plateaus that you've hit, and how did you break through them? Like, what were the low points for you?
There have been a whole bunch of low points for sure. I mean, I feel like I am a moody person, and my career has ups and downs along with that. I mean, if anyone listens to my podcast, they know that I go through these little crises and then I work my way through them. But as for like actual palpable low points, I would say 2023 was actually my worst year on record for client work. And it would, if I wasn't doing other things like teaching, it would have been like a dismal year for income. I had the fewest projects I've ever had since in a year since becoming an illustrator, and my income was it just in terms of the illustration work itself, like client work, it was about the same as I had made when I was like a newbie. So that felt pretty awful. But other than that, there have been, I mean, yeah, we'll say that was like the lowest point in memory. But there have been other points where, like for example, a few years ago, I was really trying to break into the like basically becoming a YouTuber. I thought, oh, I'm a teacher, I have an audience, people like my video content, and I just couldn't figure out how to do that. But I kept trying because I felt like I keep investing all this effort and I need to keep trying. And there was a certain point where it really felt like I was gambling. Like I just was like, I've just spent a week making this video. I might get 200 views on it. And so that was like when I kind of woke up from that, like I had to step back and be like, this is not paying off. I have to go and actually do illustration. I'm not a YouTuber. That was a humbling moment. And I kind of pivoted into doing the podcast, which is, I think it's been better. It's hard to say at this point, but I'm still doing it. I'm in my fourth season. So I'm not sure if that directly answers the question.
It's interesting because I think there's like that sunk cost fallacy kind of thing where you're like, I've put so much time into this, I need to keep going. And then there's also the other side of it where it's like, sometimes stuff like that takes time to actually pick up and get, views or listens or anything like that. And then the other side of it too is like, one, if you influence one or two people in a really strong way, does that mean, more than influencing 100 or 1,000 in a very slight or non-meaningful way? So
I think that's good perspective. Like sometimes having 200 people watch a thing is like more than enough. And if you look at it the right way, that's a big blessing. But I had to look at like the numbers. Like, is this actually like paying me? And it's like, if I broke it down, it would be like, I make about 25 cents a day or whatever the number ended up being. It was pretty insignificant. So the money part does factor in there to make something make sense as a business.
Yeah. And so when you think about kind of those lower points, what were the things that kept you going, or kind of how did you break through those out of curiosity? Like just the realism of stepping back, or what was it for you?
Yeah, I think I have a sense, like a lingering sense of like almost like a guilt or like a nagging feeling of like this probably isn't going anywhere. And so just actually stepping back and being able to recognize like this feels more like a gambler's impulse than something like based on a plan, something based on proven success or something like that. So I think that the way I deal with things is like I'll do something, I'll struggle through it, I'll do hard things, I'll feel bad about how low my view counts are for a while, but then I step back and review what's happening. And I do this most tangibly by doing my annual review at the end of each year. I usually write a post and post it now these days on Substack. And it's just a way of, for me, it's like, what happened? It's like a state of the union kind of thing for myself. What were my successes? It's a chance to look at the wins, but also look at failures. What can I learn from them? How do I need to pivot from there?
Gotcha. So the retrospective, that's helpful.
Yeah.
What do you wish that you had done differently early in your career, if anything, that might have accelerated your growth? Do you have any advice that might save some listeners some pain?
Yeah, this is a hard question. I'm sure I'm not alone in feeling this way. It's like hard to say I would extract this from my story and this would have made me more successful today, because I don't know I don't know how those mistakes that I made actually made me who I am today. There's definitely mistakes that I made, and I could very much be like further ahead today if I was more on my game or whatever. So it's hard to give advice in that way. I would say I can tell you what my biggest fault is in the sense. It's that I'm constantly looking for the easy way. I'm looking for shortcuts. I mean, the personal information here is that I easily fatigue, like with mental effort, like it's this like, or emotional effort. Like it's really hard. There's some things that are easy for me to do. Like I can draw all day long, but there are other things that are like, for example, learning how to draw a figure proportionally and realistically. I don't have patience for that, and so I don't want to do it. Now, I think that's where it's like, in order to actually be an illustrator, you need to have a craft. You actually need to have some skills, some drawing skills, and I've resisted a lot of those things along the way, thinking that just having a little bit of swagger in my style was enough, or shooting from the hip, or trying this thing, and just kind of seeing what sticks. And th- I think resisting the need to improve on my craft and my technical skills has been probably, if I just went and did those things and learned them with more intention and patience, those probably would have pushed me further ahead and made me a better illustrator, quite frankly. And it actually goes with making videos or classes as well. It's like I resist the effort of knowing how to use Premiere Pro and how to light my space, because I find these things very difficult to figure out. But I've only learned these things slowly over time, and my quality has gotten better. But mostly because I've had to, or the technology's been more forgiving. Just for example, my audio quality is good, not because I figured out how to mic my space and put soundproofing, but I just process it through Adobe's podcast AI, cleans my audio up, and I don't have to think about that. So it's great. And yeah, so just do you know what I'm saying? The common thread is like resisting the effort that it takes to get good at something versus just doing the thing that the part that comes natural, and kind of running on fumes in that sense.
I think there's beauty in that, though, like just kind of leaning in on the things that come naturally. I feel like there's so much opportunity then to get really good at those things versus like, I think getting tied up in things that don't come naturally can really drain you and kind of burn you out in a lot of ways. And I think it may be, personally, that's where I lose interest in something and kind of, I think, shoot myself in the foot. So I can relate there for sure.
Yeah, it's like a balance, because you don't want to. I'm not going to be a medical illustrator drawing things with anatomical precision. I'm just not. And to pursue that would be a misallocation of my talent. But it's also like figuring out like, oh, what are the adjacent skills or the peripheral things that I'm not going to be good at, but they'll feed into what I am good at just by lifting me a little bit above the next person, for example. What's going to make me just a little bit better on what I do want to do. So there's those things that kind of bolster your main thing. And definitely, there's a quote that I embraced to a fault by Saul Steinberg. Saul Steinberg was an artist illustrator in like the 60s, 70s. And he said, if it doesn't come easy to me, it doesn't come at all. Like his whole style was just this sort of flippant, like way of drawing and doodling, kind of very intuitively, stream of thought, and it worked for him. That was his thing. And it's possible to overdo it. Like for me, it's like I think I was over inspired by Saul Steinberg for a long time, including like the shapes of his faces and stuff. And so figuring out like, oh, that came easy for him. When I do it, maybe it's just like it's only easy because I'm over emulating or um, avoiding things that I'm being called up to.
Mm. How important do you think it is to create a unique style or a recognizable brand as an illustrator on that note? Like, what are some of the ways to do that given how crowded everything is?
Yeah, it is hugely important to have a style as an illustrator. And it's very simple. You can have all the, you know, people have different feelings about the importance of style and how to find a style, whatever, but you can't deny that you need to be known for something and recognizable. And you need to have a product that you can consistently create reliably for other people. So when they go to your website and they see your body of work, it has a consistency to it, and they can say, I want to hire Tom because of the way he draws people, or because he's good at illustrating maps. I like the way he illustrates maps, whatever. And so style is not just like what your work looks like, but of course like the world in which your illustration tends to live, how does it get used, what kind of other things you bring to the work that kind of are more on the side or something like that. So I would say, yeah, that style is very important. It's not just important for people to identify you as an illustrator and to stand out. It gives you an easier place to start. So you know, because you have a flow, you know generally how your illustration process is going to go. You're going to have your go-to tools, your go-to brushes, your go-to app or whatever you're using. You know how you sketch, how you bring it to a final illustration. When you have a style, all those things become more streamlined. And then finally, you have this creative foot to stand on when you get pushback from a client. They say, oh, can you like draw the eyes differently, or, you know, make the, whatever it is. Maybe you like to draw hands with 4 fingers instead of 5. Depending on how important that is to you, you can always say, look, you hired me to do what I do. Look at all the hands I've ever drawn. They're always 4 fingers, not 5. This isn't true for me, but like it's an example. And so it gives you like something you can push back on, because creativity is very subjective. And the more of a record that you have of your own work, the easier it is to set these boundaries and move forward with like what's most important, which might be the idea or the overall composition or something like that. So yeah, style is very important.
Hmm. And like, I think you've created a very, interesting, unique style for yourself that stands out. I'm curious, like, do you have any advice or suggestions on how to do that? Like, everybody's an illustrator these days, like, especially given how crowded it is. How does one stand out with their own style?
Yeah, and again, it's hard to tell people exactly how to have a style, because it's more than what you see. It's not just a formula. It's not just saying I am now. It's not like a branding guide where you say I only use these colors and I only use these fonts and I only draw in this certain way or these certain subjects. That could be a part of your style. Some people are much more rigid about some of those parameters. So I'd say style's part formula, but it's also a lot of just doing and making stuff and being aware of the results. So when you draw, what does that look like? Are you a good drawer or a bad drawer? Is bad drawing part of your style? Do you want to lean more into that, or are you going to get kind of more detailed about maybe learning how to draw in a more academic way? It's helpful if you're not just an illustrator and all you can talk about is illustration. It's good if you have other hobbies or interests that kind of come into your work that flavor it. And so for me, there's, a huge I'm gravitated more towards mid-century design, the aesthetic, and so that interest of mine, not just in terms of like the style, but like why that style, and why certain textures come in, why only a few colors. That's just like a very directly illustration kind of thing that I bring in. So I don't know. There's like, you might just be curious about the way people are. You might be a people watcher and you enjoy going to a park and watching strange interactions. You might love dogs, and dogs seem to kind of factor into your illustration a lot. That becomes a part of your style. You know, it's also like being aware of your technique. I feel like this is one of my hobby horses where it comes to style and craft, is that there is a deep connection between how you make something and what it looks like. And so being aware of the tools that you make and their limitations shapes how you work and how you work around those limitations. But it goes even further, like there, because of Procreate particularly, and I would say most digital tools, so Photoshop as well, this is a big blind spot for people, because you can have these apps basically can be anything. There's no limits. There's no physical constraint. You have every brush. And so it's hard for you to know what those limits are, because you have to invent them. Well, a lot of people who used to work in an analog way will just reference those limits and bring them into the digital space. And so if you go straight to learning illustration on the iPad, on Procreate, for example, I'm not down on Procreate. I love Procreate. I use it every day. But if that's your reference point for illustration, you're going to have a really hard time finding a unique style, because there's no borders for you to kind of work within. Does that make sense?
It really does, and I haven't heard someone articulate it that way, so I'm really glad you did, because not just with, I'm not much of a designer myself, but I even when I do create things, like I'll play in like Inkscape or something like that, I find that when I have too many options, like I don't know how to repeat a style. Like I find myself, everything is very wildly different every time I make it. Or even just with, sitting down to watch a show on Netflix, there's just too many options, and I end up like just looking at. And so I feel like the choice thing does sort of create this inconsistency in my life. So I can relate to that.
Exactly. Yeah. In a lot of my classes, for example, I always recommend, like, just pick a tool, a surface, and stick with that for this project. And that repetition, consistency of working with that will tell you way more than if you switch and change it every day. And it has that built-in stylistic consistency that you might have wondered how to find. It's by just finding the tools that you love working with, that seem to have a quality that you love, and just sticking with them and pushing them. So if you love just working with a pencil, like a Blackwing pencil, for example, and textured paper, some kind of like nice rich, maybe like see what you can do with that without color. How much range can you get out of that across I don't know, let's just say you're drawing scenes, you're drawing people, you're drawing ideas, like more symbolic things. How can you do all that just in this one very simple medium? What are the limits? What do you find about that? And it's almost like scientific, because if you keep the variables limited and you know what what do you call it, the constants, so I guess like math, like that's how you find things out.
I love that. That's really solid advice, I think, for kind of creating a style there. If you're enjoying this podcast, you might also love exploring millions of beautiful icons and photos at nounproject.com. Our community of designers and photographers from over 120 countries is building the most diverse and extensive collection of icons and photos ever created. Since 2010, Noun Project has been the go-to choice for the world's top brands and best designers. Check us out free today at nounproject.com. Tom, you've moved between design, illustration, teaching, podcasting, and now you're writing a book. How do you decide when it's time to shift or expand into a new area? Like, have you mapped that out, or are you finding it as you go?
Yeah, I think this is very flowy for me. I kind of do what I'm drawn to, and then I see how it goes. So there's a little bit of like let's just say I'm an illustrator and I'm illustrating and I'm working on client work, but maybe I feel the need to write about something because I tend to process things through writing. So it ends up being a blog post and I put it out there, maybe on Medium, and suddenly a whole bunch of people give me feedback on that. They're commenting on it, highlighting it. I'm like, oh, because people like my writing. I should write another story. Suddenly I'm a writer. And so there is this sort of like I'm just doing what I'm interested in doing. And then when I get some external affirmation or feedback on it, it makes me take it more seriously myself. And then some of those things I formalize into the things that I do. So that's kind of going back to the earlier question that you asked, and where I was just talking about how there's a constant process of wandering off track and then bringing myself back on track, assessing, reflecting what's working, what's not. And yeah, so I do ultimately try and think about like what is all this. If there's one thing that this is all flowing to, what can that be? Because that's really a helpful exercise in focusing when you have a whole bunch of things going on. And so for me, my primary source of income is teaching. And so if I can get people to my classes, then that would be a good reason to do the other things. And if other things are just dead ends and they're not leading to some kind of conversion in that sense, like I don't really think like a marketer, but I'm using marketing language right now. Yeah, if things don't lead to conversions to the things that I'm really good at and make money and actually help other people, then that might be a thing that to prune off.
That makes sense. How has the business side of illustration or teaching, for you, since that's sort of your main source of income, how has that changed since you started? Like, how do things like pricing and working with agents or finding clients, how has that changed for you?
I think personally, I've become more sophisticated over the years in how I price. Like I know how to price my work and I have agents who help me. And even there are tools today that make pricing and navigating contracts far more easy, whether it's book or just using ChatGPT. You can really, there's a lot more tools. There are a lot more tools in our hands today to be more business savvy. I don't really know a lot about, like it sounds like a long time, like to say I've been an illustrator since 2013, like 12 or 13 years. It sounds like a long time, but I still feel new at it. I can say that the price of certain kinds of illustration has remained pretty stagnant. So editorial illustrations, for example, the ones that remain, because it's kind of a dying breed, are no more than what they were when I started. So I was making as much doing editorial illustrations as a novice, so to speak, as I am today, unless I can push back and get a little bit more. And so I just don't focus on editorial illustration. I have heard just from other people who've been around a lot longer that, these prices have actually been stagnant since the 80s. Like people are actually making way more in like the 70s and 80s, and so it goes back quite a long time. Yeah, I think COVID's been a big shift as well for the industry, as it has been for everything. It seems to have been a point where everything changed and we're still trying to figure out exactly how. I would say that illustration is way more popular today than it was when I started. It was much more unusual for someone to say, I want to become an illustrator. It was more like design was having its day. And now you see a lot of designers who want to become illustrators. You see a lot of people outside of the creative space wanting to become illustrators. Illustration is a household name, it seems. Almost like people understand a lot more today what it is. Like when you tell me you're an illustrator, they don't just think, oh, so you're a comic book artist, or like there's a more nuanced understanding overall. So that is, like you've already said before, it's a much more competitive space. It's way harder to stand out, and I think that has a lot to do also with just social media. Like it's such an image. We're in a very image driven culture now, and illustration plays a big role in that. And so I guess the elephant in the room now, or the thing that we haven't mentioned, is AI, and that's obviously going to shift things even further. And who knows where that goes.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's interesting to hear ChatGPT come up as a tool for pricing. I hadn't thought about that, but that's a really cool, interesting tip for folks to look at too. Like in a way that can kind of support creativity versus, making things more competitive.
Yeah, like here's a tip. If you're like me and find, like, if your eyes glaze over when you're reading a contract, take that contract PDF, feed it into ChatGPT and said, summarize this contract and tell me anything I need to be concerned about. And it just, like, you have to do a little bit of back work. You can't totally trust these tools. But if it's better than me just falling asleep reading a contract that's 18 pages long. So it can make you aware of things, and it will even suggest to you your rights, your legal right, or what copyright is and stuff like that. And I know that it's a touchy topic, but I'm not shy to say, like, if you can avoid it becoming this kind of personal psychotherapist or your lover, or if you are very clear about whether you're not going to let it come up with your ideas or your actual sketches, it can be at least for now. Who know, like, in the future when it becomes Skynet, then check out and live in the forest or something like that. But for now, it is actually a powerful tool, and so I use it. I have a ChatGPT Pro account. I keep track of my email conversations, which can get very spaghetti-like. I lose track easy. So I just feed it all my email conversations, and I ask it like it's Wikipedia. Like, what did we talk about in September on this deadline? And it'll tell me, and it's like super helpful.
Yeah, especially if you're like a solopreneur, I think that there's some magic there for kind of like streamlining and getting some help and support there. I get it.
Yeah.
Many illustrators struggle with visibility, and it seems like something you've done a really good job at is kind of becoming very visible. Beyond obvious things like sharing work on social media, what are the underrated ways for illustrators to get noticed by potential clients or employers that you think you'd suggest?
Yeah. Again, I feel like this is a huge way in which industries changed, because there is so much noise, and the industry itself, the creative industry, and who's buying what where, is all changing so rapidly. And I have to admit that I'm probably out of touch in some ways. Like I can't help but be a little bit out of touch, at least, with, like, how do you get yourself known out there? It seems to me that the obvious way is to become an influencer of some kind and start follow the formulas to become famous on TikTok or YouTube or Reels. And to be honest, those things are like, it's possible, for example, to build a huge following on social media if you go by all the algorithms needs, and you post in the right frequency, and you're consistent, and you actually think about the people consuming your content, so you're making useful content that people want to. So those things are good. Like whatever the way of the day is to be seen, that is an obvious way to do it. Back when I started, it wasn't social media, it was blogs. And so there were a few blogs that the designers would make the rounds on. Like if it would, like, for example, I would start my day by finding inspiration. I'd go to Lovely Package, and then I'd go to Brand New, and then I'd go to Found. Like, we'll go, if you want to go way back, like there were places where you would find where things were happening. There was another one called Design Work Life. And so I would not only like go there for inspiration, I'd aspire to be like the kind of person whose work would be on one of those blogs. And so whenever I made projects that I was excited about, I would actually submit them to For Print Only. That's Armin's older blog before he shut it down. Now he's just doing brand new, I think. But so I've had stuff on For Print Only. I've had stuff on Design Work Life. And so just getting things, I guess it's like whatever the thing is of the day, be seen there. But I do have some notes that maybe are a little bit more concrete than that. So like one would be to be a part of a bigger community, and you make a name for yourself there, and that can be your source of credibility and even a client base. So for example, the place where I've been a part of a bigger community has been on Skillshare. And I believe that my growth as an illustrator and reputation and all kinds of other things have started within that. I would say if you're a designer, start as an employee. It's better if you can work for 2 years. That's actually the goal I set for myself out of college, was I'm going to work for 2 years at one agency and learn the ropes, and then move on to something else so I keep growing. So like starting as a designer in a design studio for me gave me a sense of like, how do you present work? How do you talk to clients? What are their expectations? So I think that was good. I would say make physical things that you mail out to people. So figure out who are the people that you want to illustrate for, and like be specific. Like, why do you like them? Why would you want? What kind of stuff would you make for them? Why do you think your work would stand out to them? And so then make something physical and send it to them. And so one of the first things that I ever created when I went freelance was this letterpress postcard, and I sent it out to people, and it got me work, got me my agents. It won some awards, even just like as a business collateral. So it's like, make physical things that you send out that go beyond just like your work inkjet printed on a card. Like, make it an object. Make it an object that is like desirable, I guess, as much as you can. Reach out to people you admire with sincere interest, not to network, but like if you really are curious and you want to know something from someone, it could be just one question that you ask them, or just say, hey, I love your work, I just want to let you know that. That goes a long way in just establishing a little bit of extra, it's hard to quantify, but when it just puts you on someone's radar without them feeling like, what do they want from me? You know what I'm saying? In the beginning, say yes to everything and just do stuff, and don't worry too much. I mean, have some boundaries, but don't worry too much about your rights or your, how long you're working on a thing, because ultimately, every time people hire you to do something, it's a chance for you to make it something that you are proud of, no matter what that is. And then another thing that I've done is like I've created or participated in collaborations where we're making actual things and they get put out into the world. And so I've made like print collaborations, like letterpress print collaborations. Those have gone well. And when you collaborate with other people, you kind of like, if there's 5 people all collaborating on that and they're all sharing the whole project, that's to the power of 5 in terms of publicity. And then the final thing here is people are attracted to real things and to people who appear to be doing things. So make things, make them look real, even if they're not, and be doing stuff, be active, be teaching workshops, talks, go to schools, be part of workshops. I don't know, just do things. And when people are trying to connect the dots, they're like, who's this person? They go to your social media account or your website. You're actually like this bigger picture than just a feed on Instagram.
That was a gold mine. I just want to note too that again, hearing tangible, like mailing a physical thing, like I think we think so little about things like that now that we're just kind of immersed in digital feeds all the time. That I love that advice, and I think it really, I'm maybe a little bit old school, but I love to hear that, because it just, there's something exciting about holding a physical piece of art or design that it's not the same as looking at it on a screen, especially when you see those things thousands of times a day, so love that. How do you avoid burnout while juggling client work, teaching, doing personal projects? You seem like a really busy guy. Are there any non-art or design practices, things like exercising or journaling, that you do and see as essential to your creativity?
Yes, definitely. Running is my medicine. It used to be like when I lived in the city and I'd had a studio, I had a kind of built-in commute and a way of exercising, and I just get on my bike and do that. And so when we moved, and then we moved the studio to my house. And so I needed to figure out how am I gonna, not turn into a blob here. So I just started running a little bit, and it's just kind of one thing led to the next. And so running's been a huge part of it. I mean, not everyone's going to be a runner, but definitely everybody knows walking, getting your heart rate up a little bit. That's better than so many other things in terms of the things we want to that we think will help us creatively and energetically speaking. So physical activity has been good for me. And then in terms of burnout, I think burnout is just built in to this career. At least it is for me. We're going to go through we're going to overdo it, and then we're going to want to pull back. And so it's just a matter of, this seems to be a theme today, is like reflecting and stepping back and saying what's working, what's not. And there are times when I just say no to things, even if I feel like I'm losing a whole opportunity. A recent example is like I've done a string of books for a publisher, and every time they come back to me, it's like I feel honored, because it's like they keep wanting me to do more books, and they're trusting me for this. This is a good relationship. But I also started to feel a little bit like, if I do another one of these books, I'm not going to have anything to give it. Like, it's going to feel like work. I'm going to be mad about it or depressed or whatever. And so I had to say, like, I'm not sure what the future is, or if this cuts off our relationship, but basically I can't take on the next title. I need a break from this particular series. Everyone's going to find their point, where, like, some people can do the same thing forever and ever and ever, and they love it. I can't. And so that's a boundary for me, a thing that I was really feeling burnt out about. And so I just had to say no to the next thing, hopefully not burning a bridge, but also like being willing to burn a bridge if it means saving my energy a bit for other things.
Can't pour from an empty cup kind of thing, like protecting that source.
Yeah, totally.
What does success mean to you at this stage of your career? Has that definition changed?
So my version of success is very simple. I'm making a living from my art. And if it means sometimes I don't like that art, or sometimes I don't make quite as much as I want, but I'm living fine, I would consider that a success. It's far more than I ever could have imagined. If I go way back, before my origins as an illustrator, I was in tech, and I would never have even, like, this is, I always wonder, like, what if I could look into the future back then and be like, well, would I have seen that coming? No, I don't think I would. So that's my version of success. Failure is basically having to go back to school to become some other career. And I think in order for that to truly be a failure, it would have had to have been like something partly my own fault, either because I didn't work hard enough, or I made some bad decisions. But even if I had to become a garbage man because AI took over everything that I do, I could still look back on the things that I've accomplished and feel good about that, and try and find some way of being a happy garbage man as well. So yeah, success is doing something that isn't terrible and that you can remain grateful and hopeful through.
Yeah, that's beautiful. As a father of young kids, young boys, being a garbage man might make me a hero in my household. So
Oh, totally.
still a light at the end of the tunnel there.
Yeah. Do you know the book Trashy Town?
No.
You should check it out. It's great. A kid's book
Okay.
about the garbage truck guy, the garbage man.
Something magical about those trucks. But you're writing a book on daily drawing. Can you share a little bit about that?
Yes, absolutely. It's called Drawing is Important, and it's about how to start a lifelong daily drawing practice, which is something that I've had it basically since even while I was back doing, in school for tech, for computer engineering stuff. So it's something that I believe people want to do. People want to draw more. Talk to most people. It's kind of like piano lessons. Like, oh, I wish I stayed in piano. I regret. A lot of people say, oh, I should draw more. Well, why aren't you? And so the book kind of helps people overcome some of those barriers that they have. A lot of them are mental, they're just logistical, like I'm so busy. So I help people. It's basically like motivational and practical guide on how to draw more in your life. And it has inspiring examples. Plus, it's kind of interspersed with my story of like how drawing has helped me and been a part of my life all these years. Oh, and it's coming out in April 2026.
Perfect. Okay, cool. We'll keep our eyes out for that. Tom, really enjoyed this conversation and appreciate you coming on. Where can listeners find you if they want to follow your story more?
I guess the main place where I publicly do stuff is Instagram. So that's at Mr. Tom Froese. And then my website and classes are all on my website. My website's on my website. So that's tomfroese.com. And those are it. And everything else is connected from there. So if you want to find my website, go to my website.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Tom. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you very much, Nick. It's been a pleasure chatting with you today.
That's it for today. Thanks to Tom for joining us, and thanks to our listeners for tuning in. We'll see you next time.